In 1972, Stanford University researchers brought a bunch of preschool-age children into the lab for some research. So they brought a child in, sat the child down in a room, and the researcher said, "Got a treat for you. You can have one marshmallow now, or you can have two marshmallows when I come back. Now I'm going to go out of the room for a couple minutes and come back in. While I'm gone, feel free to play with any toy in the room that you want to." So, what would you have done? Would you have eaten the single marshmallow, or would you have waited so that you could have two marshmallows? Well, during my first year at the agency where I work, it's called Golden Spiral, when it came to traffic and content, I ate the marshmallow. I went for the immediate gratification. You know, I think a lot of us are. Most of us in America and probably around the world are like the late great Freddie Mercury. I want it all, I want it now. Here's the crazy thing about that Stanford experiment. They kept up with the kids. It was a longitudinal study. And so in 1988, 16 years after the fact, they went and interviewed the kids again and their parents. And here's what they found out. The kids who waited to eat two marshmallows were better in school. They had higher SAT scores. Isn't that crazy? For the next few minutes, we're going to look at 3 ways that you can wait for 2 marshmallows when it comes to your content. We're going to look at what your listener hears, what's in the metadata of your file, and what's on your website with your show notes and your transcripts. So before we get started, I want to do a little experimentation of our own. I'm going to give away a Golden Spiral swag bag, including a $10 Amazon gift card, to the participant who identifies the highest number of cultural references I make, like the Freddie Mercury one. You can go to goldenspiralmarketing.com/brick, or you can contact me through the Whova app by the end of Masterclass. Okay, so let's go crazy. Let's get nuts. Let's figure out a way to make higher traffic and higher quality traffic. You know, we got to have a plan. Now, if you're watching this, you're probably wondering, why in the world should I listen to this guy? Well, I want you to know I've spent a lifetime building listener engagement, live on air, through pre-produced talk radio, and by producing hundreds of radio commercials, radio programs of various lengths, audiobooks, and podcast episodes. And to boot, I've built marketing campaigns before the internet and had to relearn it about how to do it digitally. I've also been in publishing for a long time. So here we go. Number 1, in order to build stronger and longer lasting traffic for your podcast, you need to build content bricks. Content bricks are the core group of topics you discuss on a regular basis on your podcast, or for that matter, when you produce any content of any kind through any medium. Now, in order to create a strong brick wall, you're going to need a good foundation, and that foundation is your brand positioning. Who are you? What sets you apart from your competition? Why should I even care? Now, we don't have time to go into foundation building during this session, but I'm happy to talk about it more. I've created a breakout session called the Brick Builders Breakout on the Whova app, and you can always reach out to me at the presentation notes. And again, that's at goldenspiralmarketing.com/brick. So let's talk about your content bricks. My first assignment at Golden Spiral was to identify what messages we should be delivering. Now, I don't have time to go into it all. We have a goal-focused collaboration value at our company, so I'm not the only one. We had a whole team here, but I'm going to oversimplify the process so we can deliver the core thought. I chopped a list of about 30 topics that they'd been spending time on down to 11 core issues that we could mine for years to come. Now, even those 11 were our core, there were 5 that were most important. So I created 2 rings of content. One inner ring of 5, one outer ring of 6. And we created twice as much content for the inner ring as we did for the outer ring, including building pillar pages. Now, if you haven't heard of pillar pages before, a pillar page is essentially an ebook presented on a single web page for maximum SEO punch. So, what's on your list? What does your audience need to hear the most? You've got to have that list. Here's an interesting note about bricklaying. A curved wall is stronger, lasts longer, requires fewer bricks, and less mortar. Why do we talk about that? Because you actually can do more with less. It is possible, especially when it comes to content. In the same way that you stack bricks in a strategic way for strength and durability, you have to stack your content bricks as well. That's where building a content calendar comes in. So build a content calendar that reflects the priority of your most important bricks and fill it with other bricks. Demonstrate the variety of your entire message. So at Golden Spiral, we rotated through our messages in a purposeful way because we wanted to build SEO power on all of those 11 topics. Now, it was a slow effort, and it eventually did pay off, even though I canceled a lot of stuff and ate that first marshmallow. I'm going to show you the results at the end of the presentation, so stick around. Now, let me give you a warning. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. In addition to working in radio, I worked in book publishing for a long time, and I was a senior acquisitions editor for a major publisher. That meant at my desk I had stacks and stacks and stacks of manuscripts that I had to go through. Once you got rid of all of the junk and you had the good ideas left, I still had to throw out a lot of good ideas, the bulk of good ideas. Why? Because the best ideas were ones destined for books. The lesser ideas were probably no more than a magazine article. Here's why that's important. Not every topic you create, not every idea that you have that fits into one of your bricks is going to be worthy of a full podcast episode or for a blog post. You may just need to tweet, or like we learned in the last session, TikTok. And this is where I ate my marshmallow. We didn't feel like our traffic was building as fast as it needed to go. So we set a bunch of goals that were pretty aggressive, and I failed. I was a failure. So we ditched 8 of our pillar pages. 2 years later, those pillar pages are producing the highest content for our website. And I'll show you that in a little bit. So let's recap the first point. Find your content bricks and then stack them strategically, one on top of the other, on the firm foundation of your positioning. Okay, let's move on. The second thing you need to have are listener-focused keywords. Now, I have a lot of articles I've linked to in the file. So if you go to goldenspiralmarketing.com/brick, in the presentation notes, you're going to find lots of articles about keyword research. But let me tell you, keyword research is somewhere where we eat that first marshmallow. We rush after it, going after trending keywords or high traffic terms or what's trendy or what you saw on television last night. That's just another way to succumb to immediate gratification. Look, I've done it too. I've done it, trust me. It's not what's best for your brand. It's not what is best for you. Here's why. You want the traffic that comes to your website to convert. You might get more traffic, but they may not be who you're looking for. So build your bricks on the foundation of your positioning, but let your keywords emerge from a listener-first attitude. Okay, look at this picture. Probably familiar to you, right? Who do you consider each character to be? Who are you? Who's your customer? Who's your competition? Now, most podcasters I talk to, even though they've heard the message about being listener first before, they spend way too much time talking about themselves rather than their audience. We must be audience first. We must let our listener be the hero. Your listener is Batman. You're Alfred. In order to truly move yourself to be listener first, you need to develop empathy. And it's more than just, I feel your pain. How do you build content from an empathetic understanding? Phase 1 is identifying your audience. Test your knowledge of your audience. Do you really know them? How many of your listeners have you talked to? Why don't you set up a breakout session here and see if they're listeners to your podcast who will give you some feedback. Perhaps consider an online survey for an annual survey. I know a lot of podcasts do that. Delve into where your listeners have questions, where they need help. As you get to know your listeners, you're going to identify a few things. First, you're going to realize you actually have multiple audiences. You have a main audience. That may be your persona or your avatar. You may have heard those words before. But you're going to have a few forgotten audiences, a few smaller ones. Second of all, you've got to figure out what the complaints are. What's making them hurt? What are their pressing questions? That's the third item. Those 3 things are a great start. And then it's time for phase 2. How do you connect their problems with your solution? For each audience, for each complaint, for each question, you need to write out the specific way your product or solution meets the need. Now, this is a place to work hard. Don't be generic. Don't think that, well, I'm giving the same answer to everything. Work harder. Remember, audience first. At Golden Spiral, we've developed a methodology into the way we work with all of our customers. It's a proprietary system we call the buyer matrix. Now I've got more information about the buyer matrix at the presentation notes, so go find out about that. But let me show you. See, I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. Once you get those questions answered, you're clearly able to see your audience, their problems, and how your solution fits. And once you get there, then it's time for keyword research, and that's phase 3. Take your questions and answers online to your keyword search tools and then refine them. By the end of your keyword research, you want to have the questions and answers full of the right words and phrases, those things that people are going to use to search for the answers to their problems. And then they'll find you as you work on it. Going all in on being audience first is taking the pill. So go ahead, take the red pill, please. All right, time to take care of business. Let's apply the first 2 ideas to being a podcaster. So first, you've determined your content bricks. Second, you've made sure you're listener first, and you've determined the best keywords are going to attract those listeners to you. How does that matter when you're producing a podcast episode? Everything we've talked about thus far is about the text on the metadata of your website, your show notes, and in the audio file, your transcripts, all that stuff. But what about the audio component? What about your listeners' audio experience? Bottom line, you also need to speak this information. I call that listener cues. This signals to your listener up front that you know who they are, you understand their problems, and you're seeking to solve those problems. So if you have a pre-produced intro, I want you to make sure that those speaker cues are up front immediately before or after that pre-recorded intro. And a word of warning, go back and check that. Is your pre-recorded intro more about you or about your audience? Just a warning. If you use a lot of banter between you and your hosts at the top of an episode, make sure you've delivered those listener cues before the banter. And if your banter lasts longer than 5 minutes, give it to them again, kind of hinting at where you're going over the course of the entire episode. Now, let's talk about how that works in real life. Let's use an example from my world. One of our content bricks is public relations. One of the questions our audience asks about that content brick is, how do I handle a crisis situation when everything goes wrong? Now, you've probably heard about things like data breaches, or a hurricane shutting off supply chain, or the CEO steps in something and now she's the subject of 100 memes, or maybe a worldwide pandemic shuts everything down. What does a company do? Now, here's the thing. We went further and found out what is the audience fearing related to that issue and that question. They want to be able to respond fast enough. Can they respond fast enough and decisively enough to not let their reputation and revenue take a hit? Now we're getting somewhere. So, how do we help the audience? We're going to bring on a guest to talk about how your B2B company can build a crisis PR communication emergency kit. So we've hit the content brick, we've hit the need, and we've hit the keywords, and we've made a promise. All of that information needs to be communicated verbally in some way in that first 90 seconds. And I bet, as I went through that, I've done it so many times, but I bet you even figured out a way to say that in a script, or you could do it extemporaneously like we do. Here's why this matters. When you do this, your listener is going to think, I know what I am about to hear. I feel connected to the hosts and the content. I feel they know and care about my problem. And I have hope that this will help me solve my problem. Those are powerful things for your listener to be thinking, don't you think? So now what? How do you put all this into practice? How do you do it on your podcast? So again, let me summarize what we're talking about here. You've got your content bricks, you've got your keywords, and you've got your listener cues. So you've got the information on the website, you've got metadata into your audio file, and you've got what you're saying verbally on the air. And you've got what you're saying verbally in the podcast. That triple whammy is going to build lasting listener value and lasting traffic. You probably know this already, but Google and other search engines have not dug into the metadata that's embedded in your audio file the way they have websites. They'll probably get there before too long, but it's important to use every single window, every single cell that you can fill in on the audio file and on your distributor whoever distributes your podcast, we use Libsyn. So here are the key places to add the information we're talking about. I recommend at least one keyword in the title. I recommend at least one content brick and one specific show-related keyword in your short summary. Now on Libsyn, they call it the Apple summary. We use the short summary on our website, on the main page for our podcast, as well as for feeding to Apple. I recommend you put as many contextual keywords or episode-based keywords into your show notes. And I want you to upload those show notes not only to your website, but to your distributor. You've got a massive tool there in your distributor to send those through. And then I want you to make sure you're using the maximum number of characters for your tags. We have some podcast level tags because we want our listeners to find our podcast, but we also have episode level tags because we want our listeners to find a specific episode. Now here's where the payoff comes in. Here's where it matters. First of all, your listeners are going to be more loyal and they'll hang with you for a longer period of time in one episode and for more episodes because they have a deeper connection with you. Secondly, those SE-rich keywords that you've put in through everything are going to show up in your notes and your transcript and in the metadata. It's going to help you build your organic reach for your website. And third, for the episode itself to be found by your listeners when they search in Apple or Spotify or whatever their favorite app is. It's an incredible thing. Now, I promised you results at the beginning. Here we go. Let me talk about what happened to our traffic at our agency when we took the slow approach. The pillar pages we built before have now become some of the highest performing pages we have. It took nearly 2 years, but they're now powerhouse performers. And that SEO win has fed into the rest of what we do online, including our podcast. Since this presentation is about immediate gratification, I want to show you the slow growth we've had since the day I signed on. And what you're watching that trend line, the green section is organic growth, but you're also seeing email, social media, and paid. And we don't really have a lot of paid because we have such good organic growth. I'm going to give you now the foundation. I'm going to give you a recap slide of everything so you can see everything we talked about on one slide. So take a screenshot of this, use this as your notes as we move forward. These things are incredibly powerful. Foundation, content bricks, making your listener the hero, empathy, all of those things are going to matter. And don't forget about your forgotten audiences or how out of that listener first approach, you're going to really work hard to get down to the questions and the fears that they have so then you can build rich SEO keywords. And then take all that and build listener cues because speaking it in the first 90 seconds of your podcast episodes is an incredibly powerful thing for your listener. Remember, be listener first and you will win every day. Now, here's what I encourage you. Don't eat the marshmallow in the room. Play it safe. Wait for the second marshmallow and guarantee you what's going to happen is you're going to have all sorts of marshmallows. All right, let's take some questions.